Session, I'm going to deal with the computation of the forward and the futures prices for different kinds of derivative securities. Right from the derivatives on stocks, bonds, currencies, and commodities. We would typically try to see how do I compute the forward price for those kind of entities, derivatives on those kind of underlying securities, and even for the futures, what kind of differences exist between the forwards and the future prices, especially for these kind of securities, right? So, to get into it, first of all, I need to have an understanding on whether the underlying asset is an investment asset or a consumption asset. What is the difference between these two? When I am talking about an investment asset, that particular asset generally is held by good number of investors, primarily from an investment perspective. Some people may still use it for a consumption perspective, but majority of the participants, they invest in it. They purchase that from a perspective of investment rather than from a perspective of consumption. So, though gold and silver can very well be used for some kind of consumption purposes, they are used as raw materials for producing something. But majority of the people make their investment in gold primarily from an investment dimension, not from a consumption purpose. So those kind of assets are all categorized as investment assets, whereas any kind of assets which are used primarily from a consumption perspective, probably when I'm investing something in oil or copper, the intention is copper is used as a raw material for preparing for manufacturing lots and lots of products. So that is more of a consumption kind of an asset. Oil can be used for either household consumption or industrial consumptions. So it's more from a consumption perspective, not from an investment perspective. Whereas when I talk about, let's say, stocks or bonds or any financial investments, financial instruments, I'm trying to invest in them primarily from the perspective of investment. But if I'm looking at commodities, some kind of commodities come under the consumption commodities, some other kind of commodities come under the investment commodities. We need to have some kind of an understanding or a clear-cut differentiation between these two groups of assets because the valuations differ between these two groups of assets. So we are typically now looking at the determination of the price for each of these. Initially, we will focus on investment assets and then slowly move on to the consumption assets as well. And what we could typically see is the concept of arbitrage, a riskless profit. That particular concept can very comfortably be used in case of investment assets to arrive at their forward or futures prices. But the same cannot be applied in case of consumption assets because we are not talking of purely an investment. It could be consumed from now to a month later. So a pure arbitrage concept cannot be used for the pricing for consumption assets, whereas when it comes to investment assets, I can comfortably use the arbitrage concept. And one more important point that we need to understand in this context before we start getting into the pricing processes is we use the word shorting, or probably sometimes we call it short selling. What this actually means as a terminology is selling something without owning it. Now, how can I do that? Selling without owning? I can borrow from the broker. I can borrow from the broker, which means broker is going to take those assets from someone else, from some other client, and lend it to me. And from that lending, I'm going to sell it off. So I'm going to get the proceeds of that. And at a future date, probably I'm going to buy back those securities from the market and return them back to the broker. And if at all I am able to make a profit in it, that profit belongs to me, otherwise the loss belongs to me. So that is what is a typical mechanism of short selling. I am borrowing something from the broker, and based on whatever I have borrowed, I am selling it in the market, and I am taking the proceeds then and there itself. But in some cases, what could very well happen is the broker may not be able to borrow any more securities. The broker may be having a restriction in terms of taking from different clients. He is not able to get the securities from the different client, or probably the client is very much determined to sell off his securities, so he is demanding his securities back. Then I cannot wait until an opportunity comes back for me to buy back at a favorable price. I may have to close this short position immediately so as to give back the securities back to the broker, who may have to replenish his clients, replenish them back to his client. So in that case, I am forced to close out my selling position, and that is what we typically call as short squeezing, because my short position is getting squeezed. I am forced to close out the short position even if I am not ready to do so. And as a part of this entire short selling process, whatever the proceeds that come, so this is generally done under the intention that the security prices are going to fall in future. Right? If the security prices are expected to fall in future, now I don't have the security, so I have borrowed them, sold them in the market. So currently the price is much higher, so I am going to receive a higher amount. And because the security price is expected to fall in future, probably after a certain point in time when the securities price has fallen, I am going to buy back those securities and refund them back to my broker. So I might have bought them at a lesser price, and because of that buying out at a lesser price, I am able to make a profit in the process, and that profit is completely belongs to the person who has got into the shorting process, which is me. But in this process, whatever the dividends that are declared, or whatever the interest that comes, if the shorting has happened not on shares but let's say on bonds, whatever the dividend has come out, whatever the interest that is going to come between this shorting period and buyback period, whatever the company has declared the dividends or the interest, this person who has shorted, he has to refund it back to the broker, who would be giving it back to the client. So the client would still be the owner, because this is just a borrowing here, whereas this party is still the owner. So the dividends and all are belong to this particular client who has lent the securities. So any dividends and all that are received during the period, they need to be refunded back to the client. And In this entire process, the investor has to maintain a margin account with the broker. Just like we talked about the margin account in case of futures contract, here also we are talking about in any kind of a short selling process, the investor is required to maintain a margin account. So this margin account can be filled with cash or any other marketable securities which can be converted into cash quite easily. And see, in case, see, this margin is like a protection. In case the securities price is not falling but it is rising, and then the investor who has shorted the security is actually losing. To make sure that this person who has shorted is not defaulting or is not refunding the securities back, this margin will be acting as a cushion in that case. So this is again, there is an initial margin, the initial deposit that needs to be made, and probably if at all required, an additional margin also can be requested by the broker. And the main intention is, in case the person is defaulting because the security price is going up not falling, to protect the client against the loss of the securities, this margin is really helping out. And one more advantage is, even though a margin is deposited, generally interest is paid on the margin balance. So so that means whatever the margin that has deposited, even that is carrying some additional interest also. And whatever the proceeds that come, they all completely belong to the investor only, except for the dividends and the interest that come, which belong to the original client. Whatever the sales proceeds that come, whatever the additional profit that comes, that entire thing belongs to the investor himself. That is what is one motivating factor to get into the shorting process. And before we get into the pricing, see, before we get into the pricing, we had looked at few dimensions. One, whether the asset is an investment asset or a consumption asset. We have also tried to understand the concept of shorting, because we will be using this quite frequently in this pricing applications. And we also need to understand some key assumptions that we work with as a part of this pricing process. Some of the key assumptions that we go with is no transaction costs, right? Brokerage costs, commissions. So there are no transaction costs to any of the market participants. The tax rates are more or less similar to everyone. Some basic assumptions that we go with in all these pricing understandings. All the net trading profits, they are taxed at more or less the same rate. The participants, they can actually borrow at risk-free rate, and they can even lend at risk-free rate. Probably this is slightly away from reality. Lending at risk-free rate is something that is in the hands of the person, but borrowing at risk-free rate is something that is not in his hands. It depends on the lender at what rate, and definitely the lender looking at the credit risk associated with the person may not definitely lend it at the risk-free rate at all. And the market participants are quite active. They take an advantage of any kind of mispricing that come up at any point in time. So they wait for arbitrage opportunities, and they try to take an advantage of the various arbitrage opportunities that come up. Now all these things, generally we assume that every investor, or at least a few key large scale investors, all these things are applicable at least to large number of derivative participants. So they are taking advantage of the mispricings, and they are ready to exploit the arbitrage opportunities and all. And using all these things, we are trying to arrive at computing the forward price or even the futures prices for various investment assets as well as consumption assets. So here we use the risk-free rate, which is the rate at which the borrowing or lending can happen, even in case there is no credit risk at all. So typically associate the rating that is the return that is expected out of the government securities. But from a reality perspective, as we have seen earlier, LIBOR is a better replacement for the usage of the risk-free rate than the traditional treasury bond rate. Though the treasury bonds are more or less AAA rated with almost no chance of default because of their artificially low level of returns because of various tax and regulation issues. Derivatives dealers generally prefer the LIBOR rate to be the replica of the risk-free rate, and LIBOR is generally used as a proxy for risk-free rate for all the computations relating to the forwards and the futures pricings. Alright. Now with this as a base, we will start getting into the pricing of the forwards. So we'll get into the pricing of forwards for an investment asset to start with. And within this, we try to look at a couple of dimensions. Investment asset with no income, no intermediate income. This is one category I would like to see. Then I am talking about an investment asset with a fixed known income. And a third category where I talk about known yield. These three categories of investment assets is what I am initially going to look at, and we try to find out the forward price associated with these three investment assets. Alright. So first, looking at that particular investment asset which does not provide any kind of an intermediate income. Generally non-dividend paying stocks or zero coupon bonds, they all fall into this kind of a category. How do I do the pricing for the forward contracts for such a kind of securities? Straightforward. If at all I am talking about a forward contract on these kind of securities whose current price, let's say, is S0, I can directly say that they are linked with an arbitrage relationship. The forward price F0 is nothing but S0 into e power RT. The forward price should be equal to S0 into e power RT. So probably if it is like, if we are talking about a 3-month forward contract where the risk-free rate of return R is 6% and the current spot price of that particular stock is 100, then all I am saying is the forward contract on this kind of a security should be priced at, if I am saying S0 is 100, R is 6%, and T, which is the time to maturity of the forward contract, we said 3 months, so it's 0.25 years. Then, as per a simple calculation, the F naught, which is the forward contract, the forward price should be straightforward, coming out as S naught multiplied by E power RT.